Bishop Knestout, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I appreciate it. I know you've got a lot going on your plate right now. I understand you just got your test results back the other day. Can you start by updating us on how you're doing?
I feel very good right now. Over the last weekend, I came down with some symptoms of a cold, common cold. It was sore throat, a bit of a cough, and it was a dry cough, and a bit of a heavy head with some congestion in the ears. Given the circumstances, normally I just power through that issue because it's just a common cold, and you don't think much of it, and you just continue with your work as much as possible if it's not accompanied by a temperature or something like that. So in this case, it was not accompanied by a temperature, but given all the concerns about the COVID-19, I decided to pull back and not to engage in any more activities beginning that weekend, other than through conference calls and video connections, and then hold back and then seek a way to get the test. If I could do that, I talked to my doctor. He had indicated that since I had a very busy schedule the 2 weeks prior to that, really traveling quite a bit through the diocese and visiting many parishes and encountering many people, that it was probably wise that I would have the test, and to just put that aside if there was any concern about it. So I self-isolated until I was able to arrange for the test, and was able to get that done over at St. Mary's in Richmond, the Catholic hospital here in the city. And went through that process, and thankfully, after a few days of wait and kind of anxious wait, they did give me the results, which was a negative on the COVID-19.
I'm sure that had to have been a relief. You were telling me earlier, not just for yourself, but because you have interacted with so many people recently.
Yes, I've been very busy traveling through the diocese, and I would have been devastated to think that somehow or other I was part of giving that virus to others through very innocent interaction. Was part of my work and my job to visit parishes and to celebrate Mass and confirmations. So that was a great concern to me, and the health and well-being of those folks that I encountered was a concern to me. And I wanted to be sure, so that if there was a need, that they could be aware of it and take whatever precautions they needed as well. So it was important for me to find out as best I could. And again, it was mainly because of the amount of activity and the amount of contacts that I had in those 2 weeks right prior to this cold coming on. I was probably just a little bit worn out from all the activity, and so my resistance was down, and I just got a regular common cold.
And I understand on Sunday you hadn't gotten those results back yet, and so you actually tried to gave your homily from the side altar of the church. What's that been like, trying to continue to connect with parishioners just using Mass through the internet when you're not able to actually be there with them physically?
It is difficult. Our own parishioners are, I think, very distressed by the fact that they are not able to come to celebrate the Mass and to be present together as a community. The word church, or ecclesia, means gathering, it means assembly. It means coming together in order to worship God and to support and be in communion with one another. And without that, we feel kind of lost, maybe a little bit uncertain and uneasy about our own kind of spiritual life and activity. So we try to find ways to be in communion, to be connected with one another. It's part of how we were made as human beings. And it's important that we not be totally isolated, because that isolation, as I said in my homily, is as much a danger in terms of life as the virus could be. Because none of us can exist really with that just total isolation. We need to have interaction, connection with others, the support of others. So how do we do that in these circumstances? And my reflection was that, well, we do have this technology, the technology that provides me an opportunity to speak with you right now, but also to connect with people all around us in a way that still retains that social distance, and yet can express affection, care, concern, hear from them, their needs, and then find ways to be able to respond to those needs, even if it is just putting together some food in a bag and then leaving it out in front of a doorstep so that an elderly neighbor can have something to eat and not worry about having to go out and risk that exposure to the virus themselves. So there's many ways that we can connect through the technology, which is the genius of men and women, and creativity is provided for us in these circumstances. And so we just should make use of that. I suggest that maybe everyone make as a thought, especially during the Lenten season, the time of sacrifice and reflection and prayer, just try to reach out to maybe 10 people each day through some avenue, through phone or instant message, and just see how they're doing, connect with them. And then if there is a problem, a worry, a concern, some issue that they need, then I'm sure creativity would allow us to find ways to respond to that, even with the need to be kind of a little physically distant, just to protect each other in terms of exposure to the virus.
And I'm sure this is something that you can probably relate to, having that time where you didn't know yourself if you were positive or not. What kind of message do you have for people who are experiencing so much fear and anxiety right now?
The anxiety and the unease is understandable because we have an uncertainty about the future. We don't know what the future holds. And so there's so many different possibilities we can imagine that it causes us anxiety and fear and worry. But I would encourage them, especially people of faith, to understand that the Lord is with us in the midst of even the most difficult circumstances, and that He always gives us a sense of hope, a hope about the future, that we can be confident that He will guide us through whatever the challenges are to a good end, something that will actually be for our benefit, our greater good, even if that means sacrifice in the present, even if it means some challenges here and now. The Lord assures us of His presence and His Holy Spirit in our hearts, in our lives, and to assist us along this way. And if we're always kind of keeping in mind and our focus, charity, hope, then we know we'll receive the courage to be able, one of the gifts of the Holy Spirit, the courage to be able to deal with the situation, to not be overwhelmed by the difficulties before us, but to be able to make a passage through them, united with Christ, who made a passage through suffering, death, into resurrection. That we share in that in small ways and sometimes great ways, especially during Lent and into Easter. And so to be encouraged, to not be overwhelmed by these worries and fears. The Lord is with us through them. And He does give us other gifts as well. He gives us the gift of counsel, right judgment, so that we can discern the best path to go and to respond appropriately to the challenges before us. So I'm confident the Lord is always with us and will guide each of us in a path through the challenges of today. We just have to call upon that and rely upon that in prayer, and be a bit more immersed in identifying with His own sacrifice, which began in the desert, a time of isolation, being alone, and proceeded through all His ministry and activity, which was actually a strength in His ministry and activity, that experience with God in the desert, and enabled Him to actually express fully His love for us. And that's really an Easter message, the full passion and love of God for us expressed in the sacrifice of His Son, that He makes that passage through death to resurrection. And we do too, in a small way, and sometimes it's in great ways, through our own participation in these times of isolation, but uniting those consciously with Christ, so that we can walk with Him and He can lead us through the difficulty to a new life, a new experience of life and hope.
And you mentioned it being, we're right in the middle of Lent, and we have Easter coming up. Also, the diocese celebrating its 200th anniversary. So a lot of stuff that were, important to the church going on right now. What can parishioners expect going forward over the next month or so?
Well, of course, our celebrations for our 200th anniversary, we have a number of ways we were doing that. We have been doing that. We've had a common prayer that we use together, praying for grace during this Jubilee. We had earlier a pilgrimage to the National Shrine in Washington. We've had regional masses celebrated and planned as well for the future. But right now things are kind of on pause because all of our lives are on pause as we are called to kind of stay home and kind of pause here as this wave of whatever the virus's effect is going to be kind of comes through. And for us to then kind of be cautious in terms of how we encounter one another. So with that pause, I would encourage people to participate in the Jubilee in a different way. And that is to be a bit more immersed in the Lenten experience of sacrifice, of prayer, and of turning to the Lord in a deeper way to desire His presence and His help, so that can be enhanced in us. And we can be assured that if we have a greater desire to be united with God, He will grant us that grace and a confidence in that union to assist us in any way we need.
And Bishop, before I let you go, is there anything else that you wanted to share with people?
To not despair, not give up hope. Our Lord is always a source of hope for us. There's so many ways that we can kind of have our mind go in terms of reflection and worry and anxiety. And yet, as I said earlier, the Lord assures us of his presence with his Holy Spirit. He strengthens us by that presence, and he will carry us where we need to be through a passage of difficulty to a time of joy and peace and a new life.
All right, Bishop. Well, once again, glad to hear that you're doing well, and thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Great to be with you, Erica. Thanks.